This is the Ready Set Podcast, and here's your host, me, Joe Persinger. Hey, how was your week, you fucks? Welcome to Ready Set Podcast number 30. What a show do we have for you this week? We are now live on all of our podcast platforms: YouTube, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Well, we've had one hell of a week this week, I'd say. What do we got? Vince Vaughn caught the ire of the left after shaking hands with the president during the national championship game earlier this week. It's just unreal. I mean, he is a libertarian Republican from what I understand. And just this whole theme of anyone talking to a Republican president is an evil person by association, talking point, it just needs to go away. I mean, it's not Nazi-ish. I hate to kind of use that term, but that's kind of what it is. And then there's this whole thing about the authoritarianism is a plague of the right. Well, I have some news for you. It's the plague of the left. And I don't want to hear this whole, fascism is a symptom of the right. That's fake news. The further right you go, Republicans and libertarians want smaller, limited government. So common sense says the further right you go, the less and less and less government is wanted. I mean, government is really never needed depending on who you're talking to. But if we're talking about the right and the further right you go, the government just shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. So it's blasphemy to me when people say that there's a form of an authoritarianism on the right side. Even when you see four-dimensional political spectrums, it's bullshit. If you go further right of the spot we're talking about, you're not going to get massive government authority like fascism, like the left tries to tell you. You have to remember, Democrats want big government. So you get the opposite. So you go from what the right wants, which is no government, to what the left wants, which is a lot of government. And then you have the libertarians' wet dream, which is all the way on the right. Kind of this area where people are like, well, that's where fascism is on the right. No, that area is occupied by a libertarian's wet dream, also known as anarchy. No rules or regulations. It's just you, your gun, and your land. Well, and then we were almost at the brink of war with Iran, which in reality we never were. For those of you that are novices to this foreign policy politics game, there's something the fake news media isn't telling you. And what's going on is Iran, okay, if you were not to know what's going on foreign policy-wise and just watching the news, you'd think Iran was some kind of superpower like the United States or China. That's incorrect. Iran would that would be like comparing Rhode Island to California's economy. It's nonsense. Iran is a regional power that was empowered by the Obama administration from the JOCPA, the Iran Agreement is what most people call it. Iran was never going to go to war with us. It's the same thing with North Korea. I'm kind of doing my Donald Trump right now. Iran is just some regional power. They're just looking for regional dominance. They're not looking for world dominance like China is, basically. So you can't compare. So war was never in the cards because the second Iran killed, well, they kind of already did kill someone. That's how Soleimani got killed. So if they were to turn around and kill someone else, they'd be flattened. And then we'd be forced to pay for trillions of dollars of rebuilding infrastructure in Iran. And then we'd have to occupy. I mean, this is nonsense. Mostly because Trump ran against war in the Middle East. So we're going to war with Iran, talking point / World War III was a non-starter because Iran is similar to North Korea. They're just trying to keep their base riled up. Hey, look, we fucked the Americans in the face, blah, 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 blah. When in actuality, they called the Americans and they're like, listen, we're going to send some missiles over to you guys and we just need you to clear the bases because the last thing we want to do is Donald Trump to take us out one by one or just totally occupy Iran. Because for those that don't know, in 1979, this current regime overthrew the Shah. And if you're wondering, the Shah's grandkids living in Philadelphia waiting to take over Iran. And like I said, Iran and war was never going to happen. It's just the media and their fucking talking points and trying to sell you digital newspapers. What else we got going on this week? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's the Oscars. That was announced, I think, last Sunday. So that means, racist black people are starting to call out white people. It happens every year. I don't know why we get so surprised that, this is a thing. Because I almost feel like this has been a thing since Trump was elected and even a little bit prior to that. So I'm not even being fair to him there. And, we're in a merit-based society. So I'm sick and tired of hearing that people should be rewarded for the color of their skin or their gender. I mean, if it was up to some people, the NFL Rooney Rule would be the doctrine being forced by the federal government. Can you imagine that? If you have an award show and the government's like, well, you got to at least nominate someone that's black. What? And then there's Cardi B. I was going to do a segment on her, but it's just, I can't. I can't. And she's misspelled the word government with N when talking about wanting to run for Congress. So I think she's got a little bit of a road ahead of her there. We got the NFL playoffs tomorrow. Kind of excited for that. Rodgers, Garoppolo, young versus old. You got Tannehill and Patrick Mahomes, young versus old. Kansas City game will be over by the second quarter. I mean, I'll be surprised if the Titans can keep that running game against that stout defense, that Kansas City defense. They looked a little flat the other day, or last week, I should say, but obviously with a high-powered offense, you can offset that. So I don't really expect that Kansas City Titans game to be a game. That's probably why it's the first one on the docket for tomorrow. Obviously, the premier game's that Green Bay San Francisco game, and I'm actually looking forward to that one. Potentially, I don't know. That's probably going to be the best game. I don't really expect that game to be over by halftime. A lot of these games, playoffs are usually a good bet to get a good game or two. These last few playoffs, not so much, but I'm pretty excited for that Green Bay San Francisco game, especially with the storyline of this was the team that passed over Aaron Rodgers for the first overall pick in the 2005 NFL draft. I mean, the fact that guy still harbors feelings 15 years later. Hey, I mean, if it makes you pass a football, I mean, so be it. Do you, bro? But Jesus Christ, grow up, bro. What else was there sports-wise? Oh, yeah, the Cubs signed Schwarber, Baez, and Bryant to arbitration deals. I know Bryant got like $18 million for the year. Baez and Schwarber between the 8 and 12 million mark. Don't really know that off the top of my head. And then to round this out before we get the podcast started, I wanted to share a quick story. I think I've mentioned this to maybe one person, Steve. That was a situation I had at the gas station earlier this week. I woke up on a day off and wanted to grab some coffee because I didn't get it the night before for whatever reason. Knowing me, I was probably being cheap, and then decided, fuck it, I'm buying coffee. So I went to the gas station, grabbed some coffee. I feel like I got some milk too. So when I was walking up to the door, there was a car show that was going on this week. I don't even remember what the name of it was, but these guys were wearing these lanyards, and I only knew it because Steve was wearing the same one, so I knew these jerks were at the same car show. And probably should have been right out of the gate. I should have known I was in for it because as I was walking to the door, they were holding the door open for each other and just let it close as I walked up. Yeah. He'd say it, but that's usually a Trump supporter or a really poor Democrat, but usually it's a Trump supporter. Anyway, so I grabbed my coffee, grabbed my milk, waited in line. The lady there wasn't at the register. I mean, I'm in that gas station every day, so whatever, they know me. So I was just sitting there waiting for her to notice my existence. I just jumped on my phone, check out a story. I had just woken up, so just wanted to see what was going on. And then I look up and see one of these fat fucks walk by me and just starts being rung up at the register. Now, I do blame the cashier a little bit, but she's in a kind of a weird spot. However, she knows I'm there every day, so politically speaking, I'm not going to start a fight with her. But the fact that she kind of just left me there to just die, she didn't even defend me and say, "Excuse me, sir, he was waiting in line." She just started ringing him up. So I blame her a little bit. But me being fussy in the morning, I started barking at the guy. I mean, this is almost a week ago, and I don't have a good memory anymore. I mean, I'll probably remember what happened in 20 years, but short-term wise, not so good. And I believe the guy, so I see he starts getting rung up, and I look up, and I go, "Really, bro?" I was like, "I was standing here waiting in line." And he's like, "Well, you were on your phone," Because again, for those who don't know me, I am almost 40 years old, yet people still, for some reason, think I'm 25. I know these are really bad problems to have. So I just started barking. I'm like, you fucking tourist. I mean, I don't even really remember what I was saying. I was half asleep, still waking up. But I basically just let him know that fucks like him needn't be in this area, and they're tourists, and they're the bane of my existence. And I got rung up, walked out, and then as I was walking out, they're like, "Good luck in have fun in your mom's basement." I mean, this just shows you how fucking retarded these guys are. That they're clearly not from Florida, because here in Florida the ground is too soft to hold a foundation within the ground. That's how sinkholes happen. So I promptly looked over him, told him to go home, and said, "Oh, by the way, we don't have basements in Florida, you stupid fuck." And I walked out. Don't know who won. Could be tie. Doesn't matter. There was four fat middle-aged Gen X fucks in that group versus one of me. So I couldn't get too aggressive. And it was early, and I'm not looking for any trouble. All right, well, anyway, let's get right to it. So we have persons stealing baby formula in Pennsylvania. Florida makes a change to its stand your ground law. A Japanese sporting company is going to release DBZ-themed baseball equipment. Hold on. What's that, Klaus? Ken is attempting to access the company's private jet. Well, the joke's on him. It's an RC airplane. On a serious note, I do believe Ken's already on the phone trying to acquire these DBZ-themed baseball equipment thingies. Anyway, let us bow our heads and mourn while we discuss the loss of Mark Anthony's burnt and capsized private yacht. The captain log is back, and it's day 3. China won't stop spying on U.S. naval bases, and in the staff report, Aunt Becky decides to put up a desperate and laughable defense. This is your one-stop shop current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Are you ready? Set. Podcast! All right, well, speaking of big stories this week, the Astros have officially been accused of cheating, and a report came out from Major League Baseball. And, well, cheaters never win. Well, sort of. They've been handed down a major punishment in the sign stealing scandal, which came to light over the fall. I believe a former pitcher of theirs, Mike Fiers, I might got his first name wrong, but I know it's Fiers, something like that. I think he signed with the the Oakland A's. And kind of mentioned like, we got to be careful if we play the Astros because, what they like to do is steal signs and then use audible noises to let the batters know what the next pitch is going to be. And that basically started a snowball, which ended up with the MLB investigating the Astros. And basically they came down with one of a pretty heavy-handed punishment. But, I mean, comparing it to what happened 100 years ago with the Black Sox scandal, was it really that heavy-handed? Because this punishment, I mean, I'm sure most of you have heard about what happened, as far as the punishments go, but a lot of these seems to be targeting mostly the executives. And really, we're just talking about the middle layers in between the owners and the players. So you have a 1-year suspension of the general manager, Jeff Lunau? Well, that's a fucking weird name. A 1-year suspension for manager A.J. Lynch. They have to forfeit the first and second round draft picks for 2020 and 2021. A $5 million fine for a company that makes probably almost hundreds of millions of dollars. Good God, what are they going to do? I may as well kick that $5 million over to the podcast. Can you imagine what we could do with that? We could make an RC drone garage just for Ken, and I could still have a podcast studio with a chair made out of cash. Anyway, they have to place the former AGM of the Astros, who currently resides in the Sports Illustrated magazine office, Brandon Tubman. His scalp currently resides in the Sports Illustrated magazine office. Brandon Tubman has been placed on baseball's ineligible list, a.k.a. blackballed. So, the Black Sox scandal, they went after the players 100 years ago and banned them from baseball, like Shoeless Joe Jackson, Eddie Seacotts. And in this situation, no discipline for the players. I think outside of those upper management or mid to upper management persons, you have Alex Cora, who was the bench coach at the time, who I believe is going to be the Boston skipper is the Boston skipper. Either way, he's not the Boston skipper anymore. And Carlos Beltran is also currently stepped down from the Mets manager position. And yeah, it's just odd that Major League Baseball isn't going after the players. It's obvious. I mean, who started it? Who came up? Whatever. That's really not the case. It's just, how do you not take the team away from the owner? How do you not vacate the World Series championship? I mean, I get it. How do you not? You can still take it away. You can add an asterisk. You can do something. But going after the executives and trying to attribute this to being a culture problem versus a competition problem is a little... It just seems... I don't want to call it a cover-up. It just doesn't seem like they're really doing their due diligence here. Okay, guess what, DBZ fans? Mizuno, a Japanese sporting company, is teaming up with Bandai to create a Dragon Ball Z themed baseball equipment. Klaus, is this accurate? Wow! Well, according to gaming news site Kotaku, a Goku, Shenron, Frieza, and Piccolo and Belushi, I can't read. Not embezzled. What? When you embolize something on something, it has an embolized baseball glove along with a Vegeta-themed catcher's gear and 7 baseballs that, guess what, look like Dragon Balls. Wow! Are you kidding me? Hey, Klaus, put me through to Ken really quick. Or Mub. It's Mub in the phone. Okay. Mub, we're live on the podcast. 5 words, maybe 6, depending on if Dragon Ball is considered 1 or 2 words. Dragon Ball Z themed baseball gear. You're already waiting in line? How'd you take a red-eye flight to Japan on such... Oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, well, put the phone down so we can hear you make the purchase. So we are now live somewhere in Japan. Kenny is putting his phone down, and we're going to listen to him buy this baseball equipment. So, just listen really quickly.
Shut up and take my money!
So this is the first time a professional baseball team has donned the Saiyan-styled gear. China Trust Brothers, one of the most popular baseball teams in Taiwan, wore similar uniforms in a game earlier this year. However, merch sales were very limited, probably because Ken didn't have access to the Ready Said podcast RC airplane private jet. Also, no word yet on if players plan to place the 7 Dragon Balls in center field in an attempt to call Shenron. I just hope the China Bros don't end up quitting like Yamcha did. Okay, well, Springfield, Pennsylvania has a baby formula epidemic on its hands. 3 theft incidents involving baby formula have taken place at the same Target store, and I don't think this is some trailer trash family attempting to feed their kid. For those of you wondering, this is rural Pennsylvania, aka Trump country. In December, Newsweek reports, according to police, the couple were seen placing cans of formula into a backpack the man was carrying and trying to leave without paying. The woman left the Target, but when the male was confronted, he threw a car seat that was holding the child at security and fled the retail outlet. Quote, he threw the baby at him. It was in a car seat. The car seat tipped. It, I'm assuming the baby, went sliding on the floor, fell over, and the baby rolled out. No, he was talking about the car seat. Either way. Springfield Police Chief Joe Daly was quoted, also saying the theft was a way of generating money. Generating money? Well, this guy throws his kid at a security guard and the kid's in the car seat. So I got a few observations based on that. Number 1, that's not the kid's biological father. It sounds like mommy has another friend this week. Throwing a mix of human flesh and a hunk of overpriced plastic at another human being to get out of a possible misdemeanor, that's an alpha move. Am I giving this white trash fucking credit? No. But everyone knows that throwing car seats and babies at other grown men is a recipe for success. These people obviously live in a trailer. I think I have not been quiet or silent on that. A Motel 8, maybe a tent, or underneath a bridge in rural Pennsylvania somewhere. Let's see what else we got here. On that same day, at that same Target, a 39-year-old man, sorry, I lost my place here. A 39-year-old man, Scott Christopher Bond, what's with the dual names, pal? Was Bond, Scott Christopher Bond, was filing was filling a cart with $425 worth of baby formula, attempted to leave the store without paying. Bond was detained by police and charged with retail theft. No word if he is from MI6. So in one day, at the same Target, two separate parties have tried to rob that store of roughly $500 worth of baby formula. Is there a new meth recipe available that I'm not aware of? Are infants getting together and throwing raging play dates where the formula flows like the Nile River? Is some sick fuck who identifies as an adult baby throwing some kind of sicko fuck weirdo late night Christmas shindig? Maybe he just likes baby formula and doesn't want to be exposed, so he's paying other people to get it? I don't know, I'm just riffing here. If 2 incidents and a thrown baby in one day isn't weird enough, there's a twist. On December 12th, 2 days later from this incident, a 25-year-old woman identified as Sharon Latish Green Edwards, was cited for retail theft after attempting to flee the store with, guess what, $104 worth of baby formula. Police have no proof that these incidents are related, but I'd be surprised to find out that they aren't related. Who the fuck needs all that baby formula? Mormons maybe, but these fucks are in Pennsylvania. There's probably some mom and pop shop. This is where I'm going with. Hold on, let me get a sip of coffee here. There's probably some mom and pop shop in that rural area buying stolen goods at a low price and then marking it up. And given the fact that this is a rural part of the state, a lot of people are receiving government cheddar in the form of EBT payments. And whoever is running this formula scam is milking his or her way to the bank. That is, until Target starts locking up baby formula like razor blades. Okay, well, we have first world problem alert. Mark Anthony's 120-foot yacht destroyed by fire. The 120-foot vessel caught fire and capsized as it was docked at the island's Gardens Marina off Watson Island. Poor bastard. Can you believe the life of this guy has to live now? Or the life that he's had to live leading up to this point? So tragic. He's forced to travel the world as an international pop star. He was briefly married to a young J-Lo. Not like the older version that A-Rod is hitching his trailer to, although that's not a bad version either. I'm not saying that a J-Lo pushing 50 is a downgrade, but let's be honest here. You might be driving one of those Ferraris from the late 80s, but you know you'd rather have that newish model. So poor Mark Anthony and his extra crispy, capsized luxury yacht and the rough life that he lives and leads. The mansion he lives in just got that much smaller. But hey, he won the 2019 Latin American Music Awards and was even the first Latino artist to perform in the San Francisco new Chase Center. I mean, he's got that going for him at least. Could you imagine if he was the first Latino artist to perform at Larry Lansville Hoedown Party featuring Willie Wheat and the Threshers just outside of Lincoln, Nebraska? Poor guy. And then he's going to have that he's going to have that insurance debacle of getting a crisp check cut to him. I mean, life is just so rough for some people. But you know, that's a hassle. Now he's got to go shopping for a new luxury yacht. Maybe this time he gets the arcade and a solid gold trimming in the second bedroom. I don't know what this poor guy's going to do. Maybe he gets a helicopter pad. Who knows? These are very, very, very tough decisions in a very trying time. But do you know who I really feel sorry for? The guy who's collecting rent on that 125 feet of space the yacht was taking up in the marina. Does he get screwed out of his rental payments? What's that cost? Oh, the marina has a contract and gets paid from insurance. Oh boy. Well, I feel sorry for that marina owner. All right. Let's get to the captain's log. Day 3. Hilo, Hawaii. Well, it's the last day of meetings. I get to see what the restaurant I get to work in the evenings looks like later tonight. We met again for 7 a.m. for meetings at the Ship's Hibachi restaurant called EMW. More meetings followed. Don't do this, don't do that. Meet this officer, meet that officer. On this third day of meetings and having to carry around this dreaded red folder, which I did promptly put on Instagram, which might as well be a neon sign that says, "I'm new here." Not only am I ready for this orientation period to end, but I need to get off this fucking boat. I've been stuck on it for the last 72 hours. I can already feel the cabin fever setting in. At 10 a.m., it was drill time. The whole crew was tasked with going to their assigned stations for the weekly crew drill. My station was Deck 6, next to the restaurant we were meeting in, and all we did was stand there. You see, since we're all relatively new to the ship, that specific group is assigned with no specific duties. After 1 hour of that bullshit, we were forced into a crew-wide meeting being held in the auditorium. It was a rah-rah session. And a little side note here, kind of just shows you how young the overall crew is. Our captain came onto the stage. He was just addressing everyone, saying, "Oh yeah, here's where we stand with that, whatever, corporate bullshit." And they were discussing doing a kind of a crew party on the top deck. There's a restaurant up there called the Aloha Cafe, which I believe I'll talk about eventually. And there's a outside lanai there, and they were going to block it off. And the captain was asking Richie if he was going to throw a barbecue party, which came to which you ended up hearing some audible groans from the crowd. And why do you say, what are these audible groans? Well, if you knew Richie and you could see that he was black and had a large afro, and now the captain, who is a white man in power, is talking about barbecue to a black guy, audible groans take place. It was an eye roll for me, because he clearly was trying to do something for the collective group, and instead people are basically calling him a pseudo-racist. It's unreal. Anyway, after that, we broke for lunch. And we were told to meet in the hibachi restaurant at 2 p.m. for more meetings, so I had a few hours to kill. And we were going to meet with the environmental department and other department heads. After that, we all went to the bridge of the ship where the 11 of us got to meet the racist captain. Again, he's not racist, I'm just talking shit. He blathered on for more than an hour with some talking point speech that he probably gives every week on that day to all the new recruits that start working on the boat, the ship. And I was kind of disappointed with that, because I really thought we were going to be having, the 11 of us, the captain, like one-on-one sessions, kind of not like just sitting around lounging with the guy, but I thought it was going to be a little bit more or less informal, where he's basically talking points off of an iPad to us. I get what they're trying to do, but it just fell flat. And can you imagine what his main point was? He was reiterating points we were already hearing from the 5 fucking meetings prior. But guess what he told us? Yep, that's right. Don't drink. Which I find to be a fruitless exercise. Look, I get it. The Coast Guard is making you say that. But if someone is inclined to drink, they're going to drink. Being on the bridge and towering over the heliport at a 15-story view is pretty cool. This is where you'd think I'd go on about the amazing views, the green mountains, the blue waters crashing into the rocks, but no. Our view was of a shipping yard and a marina. The good views were on the starboard side of the ship. That's the right side for you non-marine folk. All I see is the shoreline, a house in the distance, and a vast ocean reminding you that you are literally in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a combination of hydrogen and oxygen molecules that will float you somewhere on this planet if you're lucky, or will kill you. As I tune out the captain's monotone voice going on about why you shouldn't get out of control in the wheelie wheelie, which is a port in Kauai, I start to stare out at the shoreline that's being pelted by ocean waves as a small house sits in the background while the eastern trade winds ruffle the palm trees, causing them to sway in the breeze. As I take in this less than stellar sight before me, a thought creeps into my brain. This vast desert of an ocean acts like a 1,000-mile square perimeter fence around this giant moving floating edifice that looks like a hotel, feels like a hotel, but is run like a prison that has a visiting class who were forced to pamper and be nice to. Have I really just assigned myself to working on a floating prison with no escape? Well, Chinese diplomats and spies are wandering into our secret military bases. And there's no surprise here that the Chinese are spying on our military bases. There are 2 incidents at a naval base in Key West. Mr. Zhang and Mr. Wang drove up to a guard post on January 4th and were asked for military IDs. They didn't have them, so they were asked to drive ahead, turn around, and leave. Instead, they just drove onto the property. So the guard radioed security personnel and with a description of the blue Hyundai, and after 30 minutes, the 2 Chinese spies, diplomats, were located on the base. Their electronic devices were searched, showing videos and pictures of various buildings within the military installation. They were charged with entering a military or naval or Coast Guard property for the purpose of taking photos, facing up to a year in jail if convicted. Another Chinese national, was detained at the same Florida base for taking photos from the perimeter. Again, this is nothing new, nothing to really be concerned about, but, it's something to be concerned about, because chances are, for their intelligence agencies, they're taking pictures, they're like America, they're a superpower. They want to have a contingency plan for anything that can go wrong, and in this case, maybe they were assigned to a caseload of, hey, if we gotta bomb military assets, I don't even know how you call them, if we have to bomb military U.S. assets, like bases and stuff, what buildings are we going to blow up? And maybe that's what these guys were up to. There was another incident at a Virginia naval base that happened last fall. It was 2 Chinese men who were living in the U.S. as spies, diplomats, entered a Virginia military base that is home to a Special Forces Op unit. The spies, the men, attempted to evade security forces, only stopping when their path was blocked by fire trucks parked across the road. Authorities think one of the Chinese nationals is a Chinese intelligence officer acting as a diplomat. Last September, a Chinese-born U.S. citizen working as a tour guide in San Francisco was charged with being a Chinese government agent, passing U.S. secrets to China's Ministry of State Security. And if that's not enough to make you think about these about the Chinese being sketch nuggets, Quartz, which is a online leftist news site, I assume, reported a Chinese national was arrested in Southern California over the summer who was attempting to purchase a Harris Falcon 3 AN PRC 152A radio. Wow, that sounds like some high-tech stuff. It is designed as a defense article on the International Arms Trafficking Regulations, which means the Falcon 3 radio provides troops in the field with National Security Agency certified encrypted communications. This radio, we'll call it, cannot leave the country without a special license from the State Department. So you got to get Mike Pompeo to sign on the dotted line if you want to take this bitch out of the country. Almost sounds like a girlfriend I had a little bit ago. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I'm Chris Matthews. Anyway, so I'd hate to be, responsible for acquiring that license. Can you imagine the bureaucracy behind that? Getting a license to take a radio out of the country that deciphers encrypted communications from the National Security Agency. Can you imagine the bureaucracy of getting that piece of paper signed? Have you ever had to get a building permit, a driver's license? Really, any form of permission from the government to do anything? Yeah, that's what I thought. So the Chinese are spying on us. Ooh. But this isn't some kind of one-way street. We're over there spying on them. Same thing. American diplomats. Spies. Diplomats. Spies. This is how the game works. It's the old classic game called Spy versus Spy. Those fucking Chinese.
And that's Ready Set Podcast on Twitter in care of Joe Persinger at 420 Chicago Avenue.
Too many. All right, so Florida is going to be changing their stand your ground law. So you're traveling to Florida anytime soon? Are you going to be hitting up Disney World with your almost 50-year-old buddies to check out the new Star Wars attraction to recapture what's left of your Gen X youth? Well, be careful about which nerd, deplorable Trump supporter, or any Florida citizens you decide to rough up. I mean, that is kind of an oxymoron, a Star Wars nerd roughing up someone. Then again, I have seen some that are about 6 feet and about 300 pounds, so again. Anyway, the stand your ground rule, which allows a person who fears great bodily harm or death can retaliate without prosecution, well, it has been changed. So let's run a scenario here. Let's say, we're going to use Mub. Is walking down the street near Sarasota. Me, fresh from my 6-month contract in Hawaii, where I also had been training with my underground Hawaiian Samoan wrestler, jiu-jitsu hybrid sensei, and I jump out from the shadows. Ken, who will tell the police later that night that he saw me coming a mile away, he didn't, gets startled and lets out a high-pitched squeak. Almost like the cross of a Pomeranian and a small dog toy being stepped on. This is the moment Ken has been waiting for. He reaches into his back pocket, pulls out a rope, finds the attachment in his other pocket, and all this is going on while he's blocking every attempt I make to punch and jab. However, I do get a bunch of body shots in and a perfect undercut that dizzies him up. I approach with an aggressiveness as I notice he fiddled with something in his hand. 2-hit combo jab, 3, 4, he's standing, swinging, back, elbows flying, connects, I go to the legs, and the next thing you know, I'm tied to a street sign, my arms are lacerated from the batwing looking thing at the end of that rope, and I'm bleeding out and being strangled to death. Ken looks more confused. The last thing I hear before I pass out and die is, I don't even know what, death. So now, 2 scenarios are going to unfold. It's really me in a Halloween ninja costume. I haven't showered in 6 months. I'm haggard, hungry, hungover. My hair still flows like a velvety Merlot, and my name isn't Joe, it's Craig. And I think General Potato Salad has been stalking me for 4 nights. So in other words, if that wasn't clear, I was just, one scenario is, it was all in my head. The police show up, take Ken's story, arrest him, and now now, here's where the law changes, if you forgot what we were talking about originally, the standard ground law. Instead of the burden of proof being on the defendant, which is Ken in this case, the burden of proof is now on the prosecution, which would take place in an immunity pre-trial hearing. This was recently done by the Florida Supreme Court, and Rick Scott, he changed the law back in 2017, so I think it finally went live this year. And lastly, there is one final... Actually, before I get to that, just to recap here. So, I want to go back to this 2 scenario thing. The first one was, like I said, me just, probably in my head somewhere. That's a little inside joke there. The second is important because in the past, I think there was a case recently, and there's one, I think pertaining to this law specifically, is... In the past, we'll use Trayvon Martin as a perfect example. So when George Zimmerman had to go in front of a court, the burden of proof was on him to prove to the judge that he was standing his ground. But now what's going to happen is instead of that burden of proof being on the defendant, it's the prosecutors who have to convince the judge that, no, this guy was acting as a vigilante. I mean, they won't say that, but that's basically what their general message is going to be. So that's the big rule change that Florida has made now. So now there's one final scenario. Let's get to that. After Ken unties the rope and my body falls to the ground with the thud of 1,000 Thors, he walks back to his Ford Flex, drives away, and a mile or so later, he's pulled over by the local police. So this is in a situation where Ken decides to not call the cops. The officer notices the Batwing, inquires about what it is, and the next thing you know, he wakes up on the side of the road, hogtied with an apple in his mouth. A police chase ensues. Ken jumps on the roof of his moving car. It's now steering itself mysteriously as Ken whips the rope and Batwing around in a giant circular radius around him. Random feathers and bird parts start raining down on everyone as a feather tickles Ken, and he loses his grip, and the 5 police cars in front of him are sliced like a piece of Munster cheese being thrown into a wood chipper. The explosions, the smell of burning oil and gas, the crumbled metal stigmatized his testosterone, causing him to rip his shirt off. Wait, nope, that was just him trying to remove. the Batwing. All right, okay, that might have fallen a little flat. I hope someone got a kick out of that. Let's get to the staff report.
In my hand, I hold the staff report.
All right, let's go to Kimmy Gibbler, who's going to share some advice in a segment we like to call College Tips with Aunt Becky.
Stanford is the only school I ever wanted to go to.
I'm sorry you didn't make it, Deej. You should have done what I did when I applied there. Include a crisp $20 bill with the application.
Oh, I thought that was cute. I hope you did too. You probably don't. Anyway, so this leads us to our next story. When people, with no graceful segment or segue whatsoever, when people leak things into the media, you have to ask yourself two questions. Who is leaking this? And who is benefiting from the leak? If you're a Colin Cowherd fan, you've probably heard that one before. So the answer to the second question will get you the answer to the first question, generally speaking. So this story is about a source close to the actress, Lori Loughlin, claims that she did not understand that her alleged actions were illegal. And I believe she's kind of relying on the whole, well, I donated my money to the college, therefore I didn't know my money was being paid as a bribe. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, the leak from this source reads exactly like you would expect someone who is detached from a life most Americans live and what some people would call a paycheck-to-paycheck life. The whole crux of this source's theory is that innocent Aunt Becky didn't do anything wrong. It's that everything Lori Loughlin and her husband were doing was at the behest of Rick Singer. This is the guy that basically brought the whole house down. In fact, the $500,000 Lori Loughlin and her husband paid out was for charity, just like I was saying, and the couple had no idea they were going to be used as bribes. This is her defense. So she's under the impression that paying out $500,000 charity to an organization that helps kids without college prep is a charitable contribution. What? Huh? It was literally a quid pro quo. I mean, can you imagine how she probably sits around with all of her rich friends and just decries everything Trump does, especially with this recent impeachment scandal? Oh, it was a quid pro quo. What you did was a quid pro quo. She gave Singer money. He got her kids into a tough school. It's bribery. And it's a quid pro quo. Jesus. I mean, I bet Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats dreamed this was the case they had in front of them for impeachment. Anyway, bribery. And this kind of runs hand in hand with why there was no article of impeachment drafted against Trump for bribery. Bribery is a tough charge to prove. It's an intent crime, and it's one of those things that's tough to pin on someone unless you have their hand in the cookie jar, which in this case you do with Aunt Becky. Or handing over a cash-filled envelope in some dingy Boston bar where the FBI listens in a truck that reads Phil's floor cleaning and more, while Donnie the barber Fiorenzini wears a wire and casually discusses his disdain for those urban males hanging out on the corner in his old neighborhood.
And that's Ready Set Podcast on Twitter in care of Joe Persinger at 420 Chicago Avenue.
We're just painting pictures here. Just painting pictures. So, point is, that's the kind of proof you need for a bribery charge. That's why when corruption or anyone that's doing an intent crime like this, that's why they have these guys wear wires, because they're hard to prove without that hand in the cookie jar moment. So the lawyers are doing a good job on that front, but this all falls apart from there. The motion filed at a Massachusetts U.S. District Court also contains this passage as well. Quote, the government appears to be concealing exculpatory evidence that helps show that both defendants believed all the payments they made were going to USC itself for legitimate university-approved purposes or to other legitimate charitable causes. Now, an update on that is just recently the government just released, I think it was like 500 pages of documents, and a lot of those. So they're claiming that all that money under their impression was going to USC. Well, it just came out that Rick Singer emailed Massimo and said, hey, buddy, I need you to send me 50. He said send 50 to USC and give me the other 200. So that argument has been thrown out the window. So now going back to, what's going on here. Blaming the government for concealing exculpatory evidence. So Now we're resorting to blaming the federal government, U.S. attorneys, for hiding evidence that is going to exonerate your client? I'm confused how two rich people think some random U.S. attorney and FBI agent is sitting in a dark conference room late into the night around a bunch of boxes of collected evidence thinking, okay, Greg, take this file that contains the exculpatory evidence and stick it under your mattress. Aunt Becky's going down. What's even worse, this source has this nonsensical quote to the media. And this is what it is. Quote, "She did not have any intent to do something illegal, and in fact, she thought she was doing the right thing," the source continues. "That's why she hasn't pleaded guilty. Frankly, she believes that she is innocent and that the evidence shown in court will prove that. Unfortunately, it seems as though the prosecution is hellbent on making examples out of people and not playing fair." Not fair? Do you know what isn't fair? Paying disgusting amounts of money to someone in a trusted position to get your kid into a school they didn't deserve to go to, so you can have bragging rights amongst your social peers and, more importantly, feel good about yourself. So good. You forget you fucked someone who's been working their entire life for that one spot at USC that got filled because that mommy's kids had the right connections and $500K to go along with it. So we've heard Aunt Becky's source's side of the story. I have one question. What about the fake photos of her daughters on the crew team? Well, the source declined to address that part of the case. Really? No answer for that one. That's kind of interesting, don't you think? And that's the staff report.
We're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day.
The staff reports.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for listening to Ready, Set Podcast. Can you believe we've already got to 30 episodes? Please check us out on Spreaker and give us a like and follow. We are on Apple Podcasts, and please leave us a rating and review. It really helps get the podcast out there. And don't forget, you can find the podcast on CastBox, Podcast Addict, Google Podcasts. That's right, you've gone to the dark side. This is your one-stop shop, current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, we're just here for the first set. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week, you fucks. Thanks for listening to the Ready, Set Podcast. Check us out next week, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter and look for us on our YouTube channel, Ready, Set Podcast.